and welcome to the Good Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Good, a registered nutritional therapy practitioner and functional medicine practitioner. Join me as we explore thyroid, brain, and fatigue conditions with positivity. From Hashimoto's to multiple sclerosis, chronic fatigue to adrenal dysfunction, I've got you covered. With expert advice and tips to help you take action now and inspiring real patient stories from successful individuals who refuse to let their health hold them back. Start your journey to good health today. And don't forget to come and join the conversation on Instagram at good_health. That's GOODE. Or visit my website at nicolegoodhealth.com to find out more. Today we welcome Lina Nielsen to the Good Health Podcast. Lina is a British sprinter and hurdler, having won the 400-metre hurdles at the 2021 European Athletics Team Championships. Lina is now also a yoga instructor and is one of the instructors on the FitApp. Lina was diagnosed with MS at the age of 17, but kept her diagnosis private for 9 years while competing in top-level sports. MS is a disease of the brain and spinal cord, and the immune system attacks self, impacting the myelin sheath that is the protective cover over the nerve fibers. This damage is called demyelination. It causes communication problems with messages traveling down the nerves from the brain to the rest of the body, and symptoms and progression can vary dramatically from person to person, depending on where the nerves are damaged within the body. Patients can suffer times of flare-ups or they can suffer times of relapse. Symptoms can exacerbate during a flare-up or new symptoms can appear. Last year in August 2022, Lina had a relapse 2 days before the World Athletics Championship heats. This prompted her to go public with her story. Let's jump straight into the conversation with Lina. Lina, welcome so much to the Good Health Podcast today. I'm so pleased that you're joining us.
No, honestly,
yeah, it's really, really great to have you here. I think this is going to be really, really useful for everybody that's listening. I would like to start with your career because you are someone who is doing a career that probably a lot of people with MS think you can't do. So at what age did you realize that you were destined for a career as a professional athlete? And was that always kind of in the plan?
I think I was what they call a late bloomer. I never kind of, you hear your stories of professional athletes and they started, at age 8, age 10, 12. And I really only started when I was about 16, 17. And it was really only because of the 2012 Olympics. They came to London and I was fortunate enough to live in one of the Olympic boroughs. So we watched, the whole of London change and, we grew up with the Olympic Park. So it was an incredible opportunity to have literally in my backyard. And I just loved running, I just loved moving, and I just wanted to see how far I could run. Back then I wanted to do distance events. I just challenged myself along with my sister, my twin sister, and my friends at school. We were fortunate enough to go to a very sporty school. So it was just something that I did for fun. It was never in the plans for it to be a professional career. That kind of just fell into place. And I think that's the best way that it could have happened because I wasn't actively seeking it. It just sort of happened naturally. And it was only when I was 19 did I have my first kind of GB best and international competitions. And it just snowballed from there.
That's great. Yeah. It's so interesting. It's nice that it just sort of fell into place for you. So if we can go back to you being 17 and getting your diagnosis of MS, at what point did you realize that there was something wrong with your health? How did that sort of start for you?
Yeah, it really only started when I was actually 13, which when I look back, I'm like, that's so young. I didn't really question what was happening because there was so much happening with my body, going through puberty. I had growth spurt pains and, my menstrual cycle was starting. So there was a lot of changes happening anyway. And one of the first things I noticed was my left arm was weaker than my right arm. That was the first ever symptom and I was 13. And then I kind of just brushed it under the carpet because I recovered pretty quickly after that. It was maybe a 3-week kind of symptom in total. And once it went away, you just continue life as a 13-year-old, homework and school friends and playing outside. And then when I was 17, I had 2 symptoms. The first one was double vision, which only really lasted about 10 days. And that's when I started to become a little bit more aware of health. And I was a bit like, this isn't normal. So we went to the opticians and, he actually referred me straight away to A&E. He was like, there's something in your brain that's not, functioning well. So that kind of rang alarm bells. And then 6 months after that, I had like my worst ever relapse, which was right-sided weakness, so arm, leg, and torso. And that was really what led to the diagnosis. So it was just 3 kind of isolated symptoms that kind of made me realize this is a pattern and it's not, I need answers. And I got diagnosed soon after that, so about 2 months after that. So it was a month before my 18th birthday.
So it was quite a quick diagnosis for you once you had those second sort of episodes at sort of 17, but it'd been a longer journey for you from 13 with sort of the first sort of episode. And I talk regularly to patients about how they feel upon receiving the diagnosis. And in my own experience and in talking to patients, I find that people tend to fall into sort of one of 2 categories. Many feel a kind of a loss of the life that they could have had, that they're grieving for that old life. Others, like myself, it's a relief because the diagnosis has been a long journey. I had a very long journey to diagnosis. So I was about 15 years getting diagnosed, which is a very long time. So for me, it was that sort of relief, weight lifted, finally know what's wrong. But for those out there who are on the road to being diagnosed or who have recently been diagnosed, can you reflect like on that time now of getting the diagnosis and kind of how that made you feel?
Yeah, I remember the initial reaction was denial. If I'm being honest, I did not want to have that diagnosis, and I think that's the story with a lot of people. I questioned a lot. I was active, being in sport and doing everything in school, and I just thought, what did I do wrong? Like, why me? So it was a very kind of confusing. I was very angry, very upset. So it was kind of like in between. I didn't feel any sort of relief, and I've heard a lot of those kind of stories, and I did not resonate with any of them. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, how can you be relieved? This is not not a great thing to have. And then it took me a while. I'd say maybe about 3 years to really come into sort of acceptance of the diagnosis, because I thought maybe it's something else. Maybe they got it wrong, and you're questioning all these things. But now looking back, I really wish that I found that acceptance sooner. I was just fighting a lot of emotions, and now I'm in a really great place where I'm kind of almost I wouldn't say proud, but it's given me a sense of purpose to pursue sport to even harder levels. It's kind of given me a bit more appreciation of my body and appreciation of what I do, and I'd never take anything for granted. So in a strange way, it took a long time, but in a strange way, it's given me sort of gratitude and a strong sense of purpose to really go for what I want in life, because we just don't know how long we can be active for. And it's definitely a journey, and everyone takes it differently. And the one piece of advice that I would give to someone who may be on the journey to diagnosis is to not compare yourself to somebody else, because I was searching for that sense of relief and I never found it, and I thought, what's wrong with me? And that added to that fighting feeling. So that would be my one piece of advice, is to just take your own journey as it is and let those emotions come and deal with them in the best way that you can as a person.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's why I wanted to ask you that question, because when I talk about it, I talk about the fact that for me it was a relief, but I know that for a lot of people, they go through the experience that you sort of went through with it. And that can be the journey running up to it. Like I said, mine was that 15 years. So it was finally getting a label on it sort of was that sort of relief for me. But it is a different journey for everybody. And that's why it's interesting to have these conversations and let people see different sides of it and know that it's okay to deal with it in any way that, works for them and how it, however it fits. So how did the diagnosis impact that journey? Because by that point you were sort of, I guess on the path to being a GB athlete. And how did it impact that? Did you ever question, when you got that diagnosis, did you question whether or not that would now be possible for you? Were there times when you thought maybe it wouldn't? And how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a long time ago, but I remember, so I lost complete function of the right side of my body. So I really had to learn to walk again, to run again, and then to sprint again. So it was a long journey kind of coming back, but I only really did it for the love of sport and for the love of movement. It's always been my thing to move. So I never put pressure on myself to become elite. And it was never, so by then when I got diagnosed, I was 17, turning 18, and I really only went pro when I was 19. So it wasn't something that was still in the sight. So it was just for me to kind of retrain my body to move again. And I think that was the best way to look at it. And it was my first coach who got me into the 400 because I used to do distance back then. He was really patient with me. And I remember turning around to him and I said, my twin sister, who's basically a carbon copy of me, was going to the World Junior Championships, which obviously is the highest level of sport at that age. And I just remember saying to my coach, that's so not fair. Like, I would have been there. And he turns around to me, he goes, okay, well, let's just have another goal for this year. And we set a number. I think the goal was to run sub 57 in the 400. And we just chipped away at those goals. And then when I did that, I was like, wow, look what I set my mind to. And it put me kind of top 50 in the country back then. And then I turned around to my coach and I said, I want to try and make the GB team next year. And I was 18 for the 4x4. And he turns around to me and goes, okay, let's do it. And so it was just another goal to have. And I ended up not only making the 4x4, but also making the individual 400 at the European Junior Championships, which was for me one of the biggest achievements of my career, just because I set my mind to it.
Yeah,
and I never really put any pressure on myself to, be the best in the world, or, to be the best in Europe, or I want to be the best in the country. But I never put pressure on myself to kind of, be the best. I just want to be better than I was last year or last month, or
I think that's
something like that.
So, good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Really, I'm a big fan of the sport. Like, I just came back from a race just this morning. And I was the first event on the track, so I did my race, and as soon as I've cooled down, I'm in the stands watching, because I'm such a big fan of the sport. Still, being in it as an athlete, I'm still such a big fan. So I really just do it for the love of sport, because it really is my greatest love.
Do you think that sport mindset, you sort of said you were talking with your coach, working with him, do you think that helped you through the diagnosis as well, in a way?
For sure, yeah, because I think it gave me a sort of outlet to to kind of go when you're on the track, it's just track, you forget about everything else, you forget about your to-do list and back then my exams and things like that. So, and I really just, for me, it was the best way to get my body moving again, because it was just kind of the training that you do in track and field is so specific. You're really targeting those like motor neurons and the tiny little specific movements. So for me, I could feel every day I was getting better movement back in my body. And I believe so strongly that running and all the little conditioning drills that you do for running was getting those motor skills back to my body. And that was my belief system. And to this day, my belief is that track and field has saved me. So there was no question that I wasn't going to return back to track and field in whatever capacity. I just wanted to go back to moving.
Yeah, and you can retrain the body and retrain the brain, and that's it's really important to look at it that way. So your career, you went through, I think, 9 years of that kind of top level sport, and all whilst doing that you kept this MS diagnosis private. So what made you decide eventually to speak out about the diagnosis, or what made you decide not to speak out about it earlier?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think at the start of my professional career, so I turned pro at 19, which is really fortunate, actually, and not a lot of people can say that. So I was really, really fortunate. And I remember, so when I was 19, I still hadn't accepted the diagnosis, so I couldn't speak about it.
Yeah.
And it was only really my sister, my close friends, and my mum that knew about it, and my coach, because he saw the whole relapse. And so because they knew, I was like, that's enough people. I couldn't even say the 2 letters. I think I remember looking at like the logo for M&S and being like, I can't look at that. Like, I was so not accepting. It was so funny, not accepting of it. So I couldn't speak about it. And then when I turned 21, I had then made my first senior team. And actually I had a relapse when I made that senior team, which was really funny. So I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to speak about it. So I was kind of accepting it, but I wasn't quite ready to speak about it. And I always thought maybe I'll make the Olympic team and then retire and then say, oh, by the way, this whole time I've had MS. That was always like I was always going to tell my story, but I wanted to do something special first and then kind of tell the story. And then when I went to the World Championships last year, literally the worst timing, it couldn't be any worse. I had a relapse 2 days before my heats of the World Championships, and I always believe in your gut feeling. So my gut feeling told me to go and do a yoga teacher qualification. It was one of the best decisions I've made. And the same gut feeling was telling me now's the time for you to say, what was going on. Because when I was looking at the previews for the World Championships, you have your stars, your Dean Asher-Smith and Keely Hodgkinson are going to medal. But right down at the bottom of the preview was, and Great Britain's Lina Nielsen is also a potential for the final. And so when I ran the heat, I came last in my heat, and it just wasn't a reflection of how good my season was before that. And I kind of thought, okay, this could explain why I ran slow, and could also explain why I will run slow at the upcoming championships, because we still had the Commonwealth Games and the European Championships all in one year. And I just knew I wasn't going to come back for those. So it was kind of an explanation as to why, my World Championships didn't go so well. And I also just felt like it was the right time. My gut feeling was just saying, look, just tell your story. And looking back at it now, the first few days I regretted it. I regretted telling my story, because it just, I didn't expect it to blow up as it did. I really thought people would go, oh, okay, all right, so that's why she ran 3 seconds slower. But then, it went almost wild. I had Brazil media reaching out, Finland, Norway, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. It was crazy. Like, I just thought, I did not expect so many people to be so invested, and I really didn't like it. And then after about a couple of weeks is when people who also had MS or have family members that have MS started reaching out, and I realized that it had a positive impact. And that's what really made me I was really proud of that moment after receiving all of those messages.
And I think that's, I mean, that's why I reached out to you to do this, because I think it's important for people to hear the positive story around some of these conditions. And I think it's great that you spoke out. And I understand that obviously for you, it did sort of blow up, like you say, but I do think, long term, I think it's great that you've spoken out and brought that attention to it, because people do have, I was talking about this to somebody else the other day, and we were saying, people do have that image of MS of, being somebody in a wheelchair or, those sort of things. And actually you could walk past so many people in the street that have got MS and you just wouldn't know it. And it's nice to be able to spread that message about it, as opposed to sort of all the downsides that go with it.
Yeah. And I feel like that was also one of the reasons why I maybe didn't speak about it, because I was just so scared that people would be like, well, why aren't you in a wheelchair? Why aren't you in the Paralympics? Which some people did say that. But when I did tell my story, I got reached out to by an Olympic skier, an Olympic gymnast. And these are people that are keeping their, story silent. And then various national level athletes who are on the cusp of being international, who also have MS. And they were just like so grateful that someone was shining a positive light, because it's not always the case that you're going to end up in a wheelchair. And like you said, you can walk past someone who looks completely healthy and you just wouldn't know. And so I feel like it's really important for us to kind of shine that light, because I feel like a lot of focus is on like the being in a wheelchair and the doom side of it.
That's amazing that others within your industry reached out as well that hadn't spoken out. That's really fascinating. So what have you, I know you've just touched on sort of doing the yoga teacher training, and you do that now on the FitApp, which we're going to link below in the show notes for people to have a look and see what you're doing. But what have you found helpful in supporting your body with MS? Because I know that you've taken a somewhat holistic approach to supporting yourself. You use, diet, lifestyle, obviously the sport, and I obviously help people to do that within clinic. But what have you found has really helped you and benefited you with the MS around those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think I'm really fortunate that I was naturally in sport, because obviously with that comes wiser health choices. So obviously we take our sleep very seriously. We're getting almost 10 hours a night, and I think that's massive. So one of the things I did when I was at the World Championships, we were in Oregon. Before I touch on that, actually, the second thing that I really take pride in is my food choices. I try to lead an anti-inflammatory diet, which I know that you are really passionate about. And it's one of the things, again, so grateful for sport, because you naturally have an almost anti-inflammatory diet. And actually, when I had my major relapse, so when I was 17, I was actually telling someone this recently, because I was reading a book about ancient remedies and Mediterranean diets and stuff. And so when I was 17, the doctors were like, you need to take anti-inflammatories, and they were listing all these side effects for these anti-inflammatories, and I was at 17, I don't even know where I found this wisdom. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I just said like no to the doctor. And so they sent me home. I don't even know where I found the strength to just be like, no. They sent me home, and my mum's Egyptian, Sudanese. So that's naturally a Mediterranean-ish diet. And one of the cultures in like Egyptian households is when someone's sick, or when someone's, family member has passed away, or anything that's, quite sad in a family, your whole family comes around and they bring food. So we had, all this amazing nutritious food from all my family members. And I just remember just having just a feast of, basically, when I look back at it, Mediterranean anti-inflammatory foods. And I healed pretty quickly after that. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So going back to my point, when I was in Oregon, the far west coast of America, I really believe that one of the reasons I relapsed was the food that was there. And I haven't really spoken about that. Yeah. Obviously we know that the US lifestyle isn't that healthy.
Yeah.
And the whole world was in one building, basically. The whole of the World Championship, all the countries' teams are in one building. So they were batch producing these meals. I don't know what they put in those dishes. Yeah. I wasn't aware, for the first time in my life, I wasn't aware what I was really putting into my body. Yeah. And so when I looked at what changed in my lifestyle, that was one of the major things that changed. It was the food choices that, I was eating at those World Championships. So when I had my relapse, I remember just begging the Great Britain team to send me home. I was like, please send me home. And I'm so grateful, because I know it must have cost them an arm and a leg to book a last minute flight for me. But I was just like, send me home, please send me home. I need to heal. And as soon as I got home, bless him, my boyfriend was cooking meals for me, because I couldn't really hold a wooden spoon at that point. The relapse had affected, right-sided strength. And so we were coming up with meal plans, anti-inflammatory foods for me to heal as soon as I could, because I had the Commonwealth Games in about 2 weeks' time after the World Championships. And I started healing, but I lost a lot of training after that. So those are the two things that I really, really take pride in, is movement. So for me, it's sprinting and yoga, and really just making wise food choices.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And you read, I've had people come to me that have sort of said, doctors have sort of said, diet doesn't have an impact in all of this. But the more and more people I speak to who see the impact, who actually, like you have, actually sort of seen that impact themselves, and they realize that actually it is connected. And it's not necessarily a choice for people of, it has to just be sort of a natural approach, or it has to just be a medication approach. For some people it's both, for some people it's one or the other. And it's whatever works for people, but 100% diet has an impact on these sorts of conditions. And it's really interesting there that you touched on sort of knowing what you were putting in your body, because that's always how I talk about it with people, is sort of saying, you really want to, because here obviously it's buying sort of packaged foods and packaged meals that's become so common in supermarkets and things like that, but you don't know, when you buy those, you don't know actually what you're putting in your body. And actually, if you go and just buy the ingredients, you're picking up fresh foods, and you can make that meal, and exactly what's going into your food, and exactly what you're putting into your body, and what nutrients you're giving it, and healing. And that's really important. And also the sleep that you touched on, sleep is I know for me as well is a really big one, and making sure you get enough of that in there. You obviously are living relatively well with MS, and it's really inspiring to see people like you who are competing top level, and you're not letting your MS hold you back in any way. Have you found mindset has played a role in that?
For sure, yeah. I mean, that's also one of my beliefs. You have to be positive, because that's also one of the things I've read about recently, is how emotions can affect your body. It's obviously stress. We know stress can raise your cortisol levels, and that can affect your health.
Yeah.
And then I was reading about, when you're scared, like when a child is scared, their body reacts and they wet the bed. It's a natural reaction for your body to react to emotions. Your emotions affect your health. And so I fully believe that you need to be positive. And that's the mindset that I carry. Like, you'll always see me smiling, like even when, things go wrong, I'm still trying to find the silver linings and the positives in things. And I really feel like you have to believe that you can be healthy. And I sound like one really crazy yoga teacher who's a hippie and lives in the forest. But I really fully believe Like you have to be positive, and it's hard. It is really, really hard. And after the World Championships, I found it really hard to be positive. But one of the greatest advice that I've received, pieces of advice that I've received is from the current world record holder in the 4 hurdles. I raced her a couple of years back, and I just had the worst race. And she came up to me, she's like, "Hey, look, you can be sad, but not for too long. You really have to just be positive." And yeah, I fully believe that, you know, belief is one of the things that you need to carry, especially with something like MS, that not to be defeated, not to just let it, you know, consume you, but to really, see how you can spin it, use your diagnosis for good. So obviously you're doing great things with your diagnosis, and I'm trying to do great things as well. And I think that can have a really positive impact on your health. So I think the mindset that I had from sport is to bounce back. You know, every sports person has a setback, whether it be injury, illness. And so it's really taught me to kind of, you know, spin it around and just look forward. And I'm really grateful for sport for that, because it does kind of build your, what's the word I'm looking for? Resilience.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think like you just said, that sport has given you that, and speaking out and having other patients reaching out to you has given you that sort of, that sense of the good that you are doing by speaking out. And I know I get that from working in clinic with people and helping other people and sort of spreading the things that help me and being able to help others with that. And I think doing something positive with it, like you're saying with the sport, speaking out with me with clinic, I think those positive things and putting a positive spin on it really makes a huge difference to how you deal with your own diagnosis as well. So you are helping others, but it's helping you too, which I think, you know, if other people can do that, it does really help. So any final words of reassurance or optimism for the listeners out there who might be struggling to get a diagnosis or coming to terms with diagnosis? Because, you know, we've already said we get so much of that negative side of the story, we don't get much positive outlook. But what would you like to leave people with as a sort of message for being able to live well with MS?
One thing that I've learned in the past year is to definitely do your own research, because there's not a lot of information out there for people with MS that can potentially help you. So I would definitely do your own research about holistic health, functional medicine. I've learned so much in the past year that I really wish I knew at 18. And it was just because I didn't know that you could do your own research and that you could, you know, dig your own holes and find all these nuggets of information. Look for the success stories, because a lot of the time media pushes the not so successful stories. So actively seek the success stories and actively do your own research about health. And I think you'll have all the tools you need to navigate life going forward.
Lina, I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story. I know how much of an impact this will have for people, you know, with MS, people that I work with, people that are just finding this story, people who follow you. And I love your positivity and honesty around this conversation. So thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you so much. Honestly, this has been a pleasure, and I'm just really, really happy to talk about MS and really spread that positivity.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Good Health Podcast. Do share the episode with anyone who you think it may benefit or who may enjoy it. And help me spread the word by rating the episode or leaving a review. If you want more, you can find other episodes in the series on your podcast app or sign up to my free newsletter. Not only will you get information on new episodes launching, but we cover lots of health topics with the Ask Nicole section where you can send in your questions, my favourite recipes, my favourite products, tips and tricks to help you on the road to good health, and much more. You can sign up free of charge at nicolegoodhealth.com/newsletter, also linked below. I hope you have a lovely week. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.